Okay, great. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, audiences from Singapore and Malaysia. Welcome to this Buddhist Film Festival 2021 edition post-screening dialogue for My Year of Living Mindfully. Thank you for taking time to be here for this year's edition's last dialogue. We hope you have enjoyed the film as much as we did. I'm your host for today's session. My name is Passion. I'm one of the members of the This Buddhist Film Festival organizing committee. Today, we are very honored to have Shannon Harvey from Sydney, Australia, the main cast, subject of the experiment, the director of the film My Year of Living Mindfully. The film was successfully screened at Shaw Lido, and many had given me very positive feedback, and is also available online via our online festival pass. I'd like to remind you that everyone here in this Zoom meeting that your mic has been muted by default to minimize disruption. And the purpose of our dialogue is for you, audience, to get to know more about the filmmakers. If you have any questions for the film or for Shannon, or you'd like to share your thoughts and feelings about the film, please feel free to post them, post your questions in the chat box at the bottom, and I will try my best to address them. So before we begin, let me introduce Shannon. She is an award-winning director of 2 internationally acclaimed documentaries, The Connection, Mind Your Body, and My Year of Living Mindfully. As a health journalist and filmmaker, she spent many years working for leading news organizations such as the ABC and Fairfax. She's the recipient of the National Press Club of Australia's Health Journalist of the Year award, and now produces a popular blog and podcast while balancing her health and being the mother of 2 adventurous boys. Without further ado, let's welcome Shannon to be here with us. Would you like to say hello to our audiences?
Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. Okay, so let me begin the session with some questions first. I'm sure you have explained this many times to different audiences. Maybe would you like to share with us your motivation behind this self-experiment film and project where you commit yourself to do meditation consistently for a year?
Yeah, so at the beginning of my experiment, the leading medical science journal, The Lancet, had just released a landmark paper, which was declaring that every country in the world, including my country, Australia, is facing and failing to tackle a host of mental health problems. And so that sounds like a very worthy subject for a health journalist like myself to tackle. How are we going to solve this crisis? What do we need to do differently? And although that would be a worthy motivation for any journalist like myself, the truth was my motivation was also quite personal. I just had my second child, and the work-life balance was getting somewhat out of whack, and I was struggling. And I thought to myself, I need to do something. And when I looked for something that I could be doing for myself to prevent myself from going into a downward mental health spiral, the closest thing I came across in the academic journals and the scientific journals was mindfulness training, which is how the whole project came about.
I see. So I guess it came from both professional, motivation and your personal motivation, right?
That's right.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm curious, have you ever worried about not able to keep that 1 year commitment, right? I mean, in a way that if let's say halfway you couldn't continue, it may cause an abrupt end to the film or the project. So what was your backup plan? Or do you have any strategy to keep yourself committed to the goal?
The truth is that if not for the fact that I had a whole army of scientists who were tracking my biomarkers, everything from my stress hormones through to my cellular aging, if I didn't have all of those scientists following me throughout the year, I definitely would not have stuck with the practice, especially in the early days. So I sort of, in the beginning, my motivation was this experiment, that if I didn't actually do the practice, then there wouldn't be any point in the scientists studying me to see what would happen. And as I progressed, though, particularly after I attended my first 10-day silent retreat, it changed a lot, and my motivation became less extrinsic and more intrinsic. It was something that I knew that I needed to keep up today, keep doing and keep practicing, regardless of what the scientists found and discovered, quite frankly. But I just want to add there as well that I would be lying to you if I said that finding the time is easy, because I have meditated every day now for more than 1,500 days. But it's only because I've got a whole heap of behavior strategies in place, like behavior change strategies in place, that has meant that I've been able to stick with it. Because the truth is, I still don't particularly enjoy sitting down and training my mind every single day. And I still struggle to motivate myself to actually do it.
Thanks for being so honest. So could you maybe share a bit about the strategy? Because I've heard this in one of the previous interview with, I think, Patricia. I think there's just some behavioral, maybe you want to share more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I used several scientific sort of behavioral strategies to stick with the practice. And one of my favorite strategies is something called if-then planning, which was developed by Professor Peter Goldwitzer at New York University. And he developed this strategy in order to help people overcome something called the intention behavior gap, or what I often think of as the New Year's resolution fail, which is where, it's New Year, you want to change your life, you commit to something, and then often, within 2 or 3 weeks, we fall off the wagon and we go back to our old ways. So this is something called the intention behavior gap. And Peter Goldwitz's strategy encourages us to plan for what we'll do when we inevitably fail. So my if-then planning strategy now, in order to meditate every day, looks like this. So I say, if it is 6:15 in the morning, then I will sit up in my bed at home and I will meditate for 45 minutes. If my children wake up early and I don't get to meditate that morning, then I will meditate at the first opportunity on my lunch break. If I don't have a lunch break that day, then I will meditate before I go home, and it goes on and on and on and on, even to the point where I've got an if-then planning for the weekends when I'm not in my usual rhythm and routine.
Yep.
So, if it's the weekend, then I will meditate when my 4-year-old son has his rest. So it goes like this. And that strategy, along with a bunch of other strategies that I've used, I think is the reason why I'm still meditating today. Yeah.
Okay. So, you really have a box full of tools and strategies, which is really good.
Exactly.
Very helpful for modern people who are so busy, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Exactly.
great. Yeah. So, and then of course, this commitment, to the goal is also a very important quality in Buddhist practice, in spiritual quest also. I think this is where you have really touched and inspired many of our audiences here, who have seen the show physically or, watch it online. Okay, I understand that you have a lot of interest, in terms of research for remedies for mental health issue. Maybe could you share with us probably your latest discovery, if you've had any, and then maybe how meditation can really blend into the traditional use of medication and cognitive therapy and all sort of therapy used. How meditation can
Yeah.
really blend in. Yeah.
I think the most surprising thing about mental health research is how badly underfunded it actually is. When I looked into, say, for example, the amount of money that is spent by both governments and private philanthropy, in comparison to something, say, like cancer research, we spend practically nothing investigating what actually works when it comes to our mental health. What techniques work for whom, in what circumstances, and why. And I think this is a really big issue that we actually face as a human species. That it's time, I think, now that we start investing in mental health research. But having said that, I think that mindfulness sits into a really interesting category, because we now, we've got sort of about 10 or 15 years of mindfulness research. It's really only at the beginning. in terms of us investigating how it works and why. And already it's being demonstrated in meta-analyses to show that it can be equal when it's delivered in a clinical setting by professionals. It can be equal to medication for preventing recurrent depression. Now, given that we know that depression is a recurrent illness, that is, that if you develop it when you're younger, there's a significant chance you'll develop when you get older at some point. And if you've had it twice, there's a significant chance that you'll have it a third time. You know, it happens across our whole lifespans. But the idea that we could actually do something to prevent ourselves from getting sick, you know, in the same way that we eat our fresh fruit and vegetables and we exercise our body, that in this form of mental training, I think is really exciting.
Yes, I think that is really what is really much needed. Actually, in Singapore, mental health is also very underfunded. I mean, I think it's a similar situation here. Also, I think leading up to a question about mental health, I think probably I will jump to that COVID question. Okay, I think this film everything was done before COVID outbreak.
Mm.
And the pandemic has actually created two very extreme. One is that mental health probably has worsened for some people because there's isolation, fear, anxiety, and depression. And on the other hand, the work from home, the lockdown, the stay at home creates more time and opportunity actually, because in a way you don't need to spend much time traveling, you less time on socializing, you really spend more time looking at yourself. So, in your opinion, did mindfulness was it given a big setback, or is it a chance for us, to increase awareness, in bringing up this useful technique?
I think we have to be careful here, because everybody's lives are different and we're all living in totally different circumstances, and different living situations. So we here in Sydney, in Australia, we're in month 4 now of a lockdown. It'll be a 5-month lockdown, I think, by the time we actually get out of this. And I've been trying to work. I've got 2 small children who are stuck at home, homeschooling. And so I actually have less time in lockdown than I've ever had. I it is enormously difficult for me to find time to sit and practice. And so I think we need to go gentle and be kind on ourselves. We need to do what we need to do in order to get through this. But I think you're right as well, pointing out that there is opportunity here for lockdown. And I think this is an opportunity to practice mindfulness in our everyday lives as well, and to use the training, hopefully. So in my circumstance, I'd been putting this training, I've been training every single day. So here I am facing something that is enormously difficult, and now's the time when I call on that training, and to be with my kids through the difficulties, and to nurture and nourish and protect them, um, and to practice the art of acceptance instead of this resistance and this tension and this kind of raging against the circumstances. So you're right that there are opportunities in lockdown, but it's that fine line, isn't it, between being gentle and kind on ourselves and also putting in the work and doing the effort, Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Because personally, actually, I find my own practice increase a lot, much more.
Oh, good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, because I'm also been meditating for the last about 20 years. So, in a way, actually, the lockdown was an opportunity for me, actually. So, it could be, I don't know, it could be, for someone else too, So, I'm just curious from your point of view, has it been an opportunity? Okay.
Mm.
So, anyway, a related question about children, because I'm also a mother of two, just like you. I mean, we also face home-based learning and so on. So, do you think mindfulness training should be adopted by mainstream education system around the world, especially for young children, probably starting from preschool? Is there such any development in Australia itself, or are you aware of? Or I mean,
There
are you
are there are a
propagating?
lot of really well-intended people. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say that there are a lot of very well-intended people all around the world who are putting in place mindfulness programs in schools. And I certainly, from a personal perspective, wish that mindfulness training is a skill that I had have been taught from a very young age. I think my life would have been very different had I known um, how to do this and trained in it. But having said that, I've got a big caveat because we still don't know a lot yet about how training the mind in this way can affect our development, and for whom, and in what methods it is appropriate. I sort of often think about my kids when they were little. They were still developing a sense of self and a sense of identity, and deep and the sort of mindfulness training that I'm doing more recently is actually deconstructing that. So I think that basically it's another call for more research, and I'm fascinated to see what comes from programs like the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is looking at doing forms of mindfulness training, age-appropriate mindfulness training from as young as preschool. I think that's fascinating. It's called the Kindness Curriculum. I also think it's really interesting to see what the outcomes of Willem Kuyken's study at the University of Oxford will be, where he's trained a lot of mindfulness teachers who have been delivering mindfulness to kids, to teenagers, to see what impact that training has in preventing them from developing depression. But we have to be careful not to oversell this, because we're still waiting for the results of all that research. So there's a lot of work to go. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. But I think you really said it quite right. I think we need to have age-appropriate methods of delivery, because in a way, our stages of development is very different from young, to teenage to adult and so on. So we have a question from the audience. Let me check. It's from Hui Ling. She's saying, "Hi Shannon, given the vast range of meditation techniques, how do you narrow down the options to the ones to proceed further?"
I know that is such a good question, because it's like there's so much out there, isn't there? And how do you kind of work out what's the real deal and what's not? I'll refer you to a piece that I wrote on my website called a beginner's guide to starting a mindfulness practice. It's a free guide that's available there on my website. Just if you search on my website, so my website is shannonharvey.com, and if you go to the blog and you search a beginner's guide, it will come up, because I think it's about finding good mindfulness teachers. I think it's about finding the teacher that resonates with you. I think that mindfulness apps have a certain place, and I, for one, certainly still use a meditation app to track my minutes meditating. But at the same time, there's nothing like having a good teacher. The way that I describe it is, it's like, imagine if you wanted to take up something like ballet, or you wanted to take up golf, anything that requires skill to learn. You can sit there and you can watch YouTube videos about dancing, and you can sit there and you can watch tutorials online about how to play golf. But there's nothing like having a teacher who can actually show you personally how to hold that golf stick, or how to point your toe in the right place. So I think that finding a really good mindfulness teacher who's got decades of experience that you resonate with, I think, is the key. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's great advice, for all of us here. And then, okay, let's see. So, mindfulness is not a new theme in our festival selection. Many years back, we had featured one film that talks about applying mindfulness to help the prison inmates. So in your film, you also talk about a very interesting group who are the refugees. So we're just curious, can they really benefit from mindfulness practice while struggling, for basic human survival? And could you share more about your experience when you're visiting the refugee camp? Any insights after the visit?
Thank you for asking this question. This is actually the thing that I'm most passionate about. The really, really fascinating work that's being done by Professor Amit Bernstein from the University of Haifa, which was featured in the film, where they are delivering mindfulness programs to people who are the most traumatized people on the planet. These are people who have been witnessed torture, who have been through the entire refugee experience of, trying to flee to another country, being shot at, witnessing rape, being raped, everything. And then now living not even as recognized refugees, they are seeking asylum. So, I mean, that just takes uncertainty to a whole new level, and it takes post-traumatic stress to a whole new level. And what's really interesting is that Amit Bernstein has developed this trauma-informed program, the 9 program that draws on the trauma research so far, as well as what we know from mindfulness research. And they deliver it in these beautiful group settings by very skilled practitioners. And the results from the initial randomized clinical trials are really, really promising, in that people, one refugee, or one asylum seeker rather, that I spoke to, Dawit, who was a former child soldier, East African child soldier, said, this is the first time that somebody's ever, if somebody offered me 10,000 Israeli shekels or this 9-week program, I would take this 9-week program, because the 10,000 shekels are not going to solve my problems. But the mindfulness training shows me how I can help myself. And I think that really is the key, actually, for mindfulness training for all of us, is that this is not about needing to see a therapist one-on-one in order to solve our problems. This is about doing the training so that we can solve them for ourselves.
Yes, in a way, we are our own teacher, in a sense, and then we need to be, we need to constantly practice such that, we are equipped ourselves with the skills, with the right skills, and then we can do it anytime, anywhere in the world, and not be reliant on external factors. So how is it like, since the movie, since the film till now, how is it like? And I think you have shared a little bit about the challenges now. I think during the lockdown, you find it less time, right, for yourself. But after this whole period of practice of mindfulness, do you really feel an internal sense, a sense of inner peace? And has mindfulness affected your outlook in life and in parenting style or in work style? Yeah.
Mindfulness has changed everything for me. It's been the best thing that I've ever done, aside from marrying my delightful husband Jules and having our 2 gorgeous boys. This training has been so transformational for me. You might remember at the beginning of the movie, when I started this, I was sort of 1 or 2 nights a week, I was struggling to sleep. There's
Yep.
that insomnia, thoughts kind of just like going crazy in my head. And despite the lockdowns, despite the fact that, the pandemic began right when we were releasing this movie, despite it all, I haven't actually had insomnia once since I, began really training in this mindfulness training. Like it's just not a problem for me. And it's like, God, that's amazing.
Wow, yes.
Yeah.
I think you also mentioned about, I think it solved your pain. I think that you have this relationship with this chronic pain in the body. How is it like? I mean,
Oh, God, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, chronic pain is just, right now as I'm speaking to you, it's just not an issue for me. It's like, it's just so a non-issue. And I'm not, this is not to say that I'm cured from my illness, because if I stop looking after myself and I start eating badly and I stop exercising and practicing yoga and doing all those things that I do to stay well, I know that my symptoms will return. But this mindfulness training really, first of all, helped me change my relationship to my chronic pain. But it also enables me, it's kind of like this ability to look after, it gives me an extra ability to look after myself so that chronic pain actually doesn't flare up.
Yes, and of course, you have probably strengthened your ability to take care of others, your own family members, your children, and your loved ones.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. And that's now my biggest motivation. It's like, I'm a much better human being when I'm practicing and doing this work. I'm so much better for the people around me. So that in and of itself is a pretty good motivation.
Yes, correct. Yeah, great. Let me check if there's any more questions. Okay, so maybe we're coming to almost a close to the dialogue. Maybe you can share any with us any new project that is in progress, any upcoming
Sure.
works.
Yes.
This is the
Well,
best time.
being independent filmmakers, our challenge is, of course, how we finance our films. So that's our only stumbling block at the moment is getting the funding going. But we've got two really exciting new projects that are ready to go to shoot as soon as the Australian borders open. We are away and producing. So one of them is about preventing mental illness from childhood.
Oh,
So
wow.
the idea that is what can we do as parents and educators and adults, what can we do now for our young people to stop them from developing mental illness in the first place? And would that potentially be the solution to the mental illness epidemic? So that I'm so excited about that project. There's some really amazing research that I'm looking forward to elevating on the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
And the other project is slightly different, actually. It's exploring the role of the food industry in the chronic disease epidemic. So it's more of an investigative piece. Yeah.
See, okay, that sounds really exciting, and we hope to feature them also at our film festival. So, okay, before we end, what is your final message to our audience, and what kind of main takeaway you like our audience to have from your film, this film?
Oh, what's my main takeaway
Yeah.
from the film? I think the fact that our mental well-being is something that we can train. That it's something that, provided we can be committed and practice with consistency, it is something that we can recover from. It's not something that can happen. Mental well-being is affected by the world around us and the circumstances we find ourselves in. That's true. But there is something that we can all be doing for ourselves to give ourselves the best opportunities to cope with life's struggles and difficulties. So,
Difficulties.
yeah. Mm.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the lovely message, and thank you once again, for being with good health and good conditions. I think before I end, oh yes, our audience would like to thank you for this motivating film. I think she loves your energy that you put in order for you to reach your goal, and it's very inspiring for her. She said, keep going and look forward to your new project. Yes, I think it stays the same
You.
for all of us here. And dear audiences, if you'd like to catch this film, you still have the last chance, as we have the last physical screening at Shaw Theatre today at 4:15 p.m. Or you can buy our online pass to watch it online. Our Buddhist Film Festival will be ending very soon on the 8th of October. Buy the online pass as soon so they can catch all the 8 movies, and do support our merchandise, which is our limited edition T-shirt. Thank you once again for your support, and we hope to see you back, in 2 years' time at the cinema itself. And probably we can invite Shannon over to Singapore if we have the chance to see you in person.
Sounds great.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Yes, bye.